Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Giridhardhari Gopi Janavalabha Giridhardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Astuttadashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samveda Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nasta Presha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Mukam karoti vachalam pangulangayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurundinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Isharam Om Jnanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Brahmapada Swami Ati Namine Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Ati Namine Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Good morning. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. Reading from 10th Canto, Chapter 87, Verse 35. Go ahead and pull that up on your cell phones because we don't have it on the board. Pardon me. Bhuvi pura punyatirtha sarananya risho vimdas ta uta bhava parambuja hrido gabid angira jala dadati sankrin manastvai ya atmani nitya sukhe na punarupasate purusha sarahara vasatan bhuvi pura punyatirtha sarananya rishyo vimdas ta uta bhavat parambuja hrido gabid angira jala dadhati sankrin manastai ya atmani nitya sukhe na punarupasate purusha sarahara vasatan. Bhuvi pura punya tirtha sarananya risho vimdas tad uta bhavat parambuja hrido gabid angira jala dadhati sankrin manastai ya atmani nitya sukhe na punar upasate purusha sarahara vasatan. Bhuvi pura punya tirtha sarananya risho vimadas ta uta bhavat parambujo hrido gabid angira jala dadati sankrin manastvai ya atmani nitya sukhe na punarupasate purusha sarahara vasatan. Bhuvi, on the earth, puru, greatly, punya, pious, tirtha, places of pilgrimage, saranani, and personal abodes of the Supreme Lord. Rishayaha, sages, vimadaha, free from false pride. Te, they. Utta, indeed. Bhavat, your. Pada, feet. Ambuja, lotus. Hridaha, in whose hearts. Aga, sins. Bhit, which destroys. Angri, having bathed whose feet. Jalaha, the water. Dadati, turn. Sankrit, even once. Manaha, their minds. Twai, toward you. Ye, who? Atmani, toward the Supreme Soul. Nitya, always. Sukhe, who is happy. Napunaha, never again. Upasate, they worship. Purusha, of a man. Sara, the essential qualities. Hara, which steal away. Avastahan, their mundane homes. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Sages, free from false pride, live on this earth by frequenting the sacred pilgrimage sites and those places where the Supreme Lord displayed His pastimes. Because such devotees keep your lotus feet within their hearts, the water that washes their feet destroys all sins. Anyone who even once turns his mind toward you, the ever-blissful soul of all existence, no longer dedicates himself to serving family life at home, which simply robs a man of his good qualities. Purport. The qualification of an aspiring sage is that he has learned about the absolute truth from standard authorities and developed a sober mood of renunciation. To develop his capacity for discriminating the important from the unimportant, such a person often wanders from one holy site to another, taking advantage of the association of great souls who frequent or reside in these places. If, in the course of his travels, the aspiring sage can begin to realize the Supreme Lord's lotus feet in the core of his heart, he will be released from the illusion of false ego and from the painful bondage of lust, envy, and greed. Though he may still go to places of pilgrimage to bathe away his sins, the now purified sage has the power to sanctify others with the water that washes his feet and with the realized instructions he imparts. Such a sage is described by the Mundaka Upanishad. The knot in the heart is pierced, all misgivings are cut to pieces, and the chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the Supreme Lord everywhere, within all superior and inferior beings. To sages who have reached this stage, the Mundaka Upanishad thus pays homage. Obeisances to the topmost sages, obeisances to the topmost sages. Putting aside the affectionate company of wives, children, friends, and followers, saintly Vaishnavas travel to the holy dhams, where the Supreme Lord's worship can be most successfully prosecuted, places such as Vrindavan, Mayapur, and Jagannath Puri, or anywhere else, sincere devotees of Lord Vishnu congregate. Even those Vaishnavas who have not taken sannyas and still live at home or in their guru's ashram, but who have once tasted just a drop of the sublime pleasure of devotional service, will also have little inclination to meditate on the pleasures of materialistic family life which robs a person of his discretion, determination, sobriety, tolerance, and peace of mind. Srila Sridhar Swami says, "My dear Lord, when will I give up all sense gratification and engage incessantly in meditating upon you? And when will I take up residence in the hermitages of saintly devotees, free from false pride? Then I will become fully immersed in the inundation of nectar pouring from the devotees' lotus mouths as they chant sacred narrations about you. And then, O Lord Narahari, I will never again have to take a material body." The chapter that we're reading, which is called Prayers of the Personified Vedas, starts out by King Parikshit asking Shukadev Goswami how the Lord can be described by the Vedas, because the Lord can't be described with words. So it sounds almost like a contradiction that the Vedas can describe the Lord. In that connection, it's interesting to note that Harinam Chintamani states that as the words of the Vedas can be understood by a primary and secondary meaning, the primary meaning of the Vedas is describing the Lord and should be accepted wholly. But the secondary meaning is rejectable because it's an impersonal interpretation. So in this chapter, the Shrutis, or the Vedas, in a personified form, offer their direct glorifications of Krishna. In Jiva Goswami's commentary, he says what the Shrutis are doing here is saying that even the example of a saintly person or the glories of the Dham are due to the magnificence of the Supreme Lord Krishna, and that those glories of those places and people are coming from him alone. The Shrutis are offering their glorification directly and indirectly, and here it's a little more indirect, and they're glorifying the Lord by glorifying the Lord's devotees. When they say Rishio Vimdasta Uta Bhavat Parambuja Hrido, the sages who are free from false pride, who have the lotus feet of the Lord within their heart. The Shrutis are glorifying places of pilgrimage, Punyatirtha Sadanani, pious places of pilgrimages, and personal abodes of the Lord. Those places become places of pilgrimage because of their association with the Lord. And there are also certain phrases in this verse that are glorifying the Lord by expressing his attributes and qualities, like Gabid Angri Jala, which describes the water that bathes the feet of the devotees, purifies sins, and Dadati Sankrin Manas Twai, those who even once have their minds turned towards Krishna Punar Upasate Purusha Sara, never worship mundane things which rob them of good qualities. There's also a direct qualification of Krishna in this verse. Ya Atmani Nitya Suke, the Lord who is the super soul, who is always happy. We can take a little time and discuss each of these individual objects of glorification. So, places of pilgrimage and the nectar of devotion. Srila Prabhupada gives a nice analogy just in the introduction. He says, for instance, if someone says, give something to eat to the man with the weapons, the eating process is done by the man and not the weapons. Similarly, in Krishna consciousness, a devotee may be interested in the paraphernalia and locations, such as the battlefield of Kurukshetra, which are associated with Krishna, but he is not concerned with simply any battlefield. He is concerned with Krishna, his speech, his instructions, etc. It is because Krishna is there that the battlefield is so important. So this, I feel really fortunate actually to be speaking on this verse because it's been a great object of meditation. I just spent the last 6 months traveling from different pilgrimage places to different pilgrimage places. And it really gives one an opportunity to deeply absorb in meditation on Krishna and really go internal with one's bhajan. And in the Dham, it's very easy to find sadhus just floating around in and out all of the time. So I had the great fortune to spend a lot of time with a lot of sadhus, because that's the nature of the Dham. Is you go to the Dham and you find sadhus. And it was such a profound experience doing that for such an extended period of time that I decided to just start writing about it. And after the first couple of writing sessions, I said, well, this is going to be book-sized by the time I'm done, so let's just make it a book. And that really mentally takes me back to the Dham every time I write. Just kind of reliving those experiences and being able to go back and think about different interactions I had and extract even more nectar out of them. So the Dham is a very special place. In his commentary to this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes the Gopal Tapani Upanishad, and he says, in the same way as there are 7 divine cities on the peak of Mount Meru, which are meant for those who have material desires, pardon me, so in this earthly planetary system, So in this earthly planetary system, there are 7 divine cities, some of which are meant for persons who are free from material desires, and others of which are meant for those who still have material desires. Among these 7 cities, the kingdom of God is directly manifest as the city of Lord Gopal. O Brahmana, I will remain always in Mathura, manifesting my supreme effulgent spiritual form, my original personal aspect, which is distinct from all varieties of material form. Those who remember this form of mine in their hearts, O Brahmana, are sure to attain my abode. From this, we can clearly understand that the places of pilgrimage are important due to their association with Krishna. And it's Krishna's potency. To say it another way, it's Krishna's potency that gives importance to such places. Sometimes we might become mistaken in this regard, thinking that the Dham is the Dham because it's the Dham. And it's a Dham, which is a Dham. But the Dham is the Dham because it's Krishna's place. In that connection of being confused about the nature of the Dham, there are some pertinent offenses. There's actually 10 in total, 10 offenses to the Dham. But a couple of them that came to mind when I was preparing for this class is it's an offense to assume that the Dham is a temporary place. Because it's a pastime place of Krishna, it's an eternal place where he is always doing his activities. It's also an offense to the Dham to think that the Dham belongs to a mundane country or province. The Dham appears in a particular part of the globe for the purpose of facilitating Krishna's pastimes, but mundane borders come and go. Not even 100 years ago, India was under British rule, and now the country of India, though it's independent from British rule, is still a part of the British Commonwealth. But Vrindavan is eternally controlled by Srimati Radharani, regardless of the mundane men that claim to be in control or possession of it. It's also, in that same regard, an offense to consider the places of demigods to be equal to the places of Lord Vishnu. While there may be some places considered special due to their connection with demigods, those places aren't equal to the Dham. This is akin to considering the names of Vishnu or Shiva to be separate from the names of Lord Vishnu. And it is similarly offensive to consider the glories of the Dham to be limited, temporary, or imaginary, as the Dham is the place of Krishna, and Krishna's glories are unlimited and pervading. Those glories also pervade the Dham. We should also keep within the front of our minds that all of our temples are also places of pilgrimage. This might appear to be some mundane structure, especially temples like this one that have taken over buildings that were previously used by others that aren't built from the ground up with some kind of architecture or another in mind. But because their lordships are residing here, it's no longer a mundane place. It's not a material place. This is one of Krishna's palaces. And it is a place for Krishna to perform his pastimes as he wishes. And it's a place for sadhus to come and gather and discuss Krishna. So when we come to the temple with that mindset that I'm going to a tirtha, I'm going to a dham, then we get a little bit more out of our time at the temple. So the verse also glorifies those who once turn their minds towards Krishna and the devotees of the Lord. This purport that Hridayananda Maharaj just wrote quotes the Mundaka Upanishad, which Jiva Goswami uses in his commentary as well. And it says, thus the knot in the heart is pierced and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the Lord everywhere within all superior and inferior beings. This is the level of vision that we should all try to come to at some point in our life, the thought process that we should be trying to cultivate. Krishna himself tells us as much in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. When one has this level of vision, and when we can focus our minds on Krishna, especially Krishna in the heart of all living beings, and we see everything in relation to him, we are seeing things as they actually are. We stop seeing the mundane segregations that we might invent, and we're understanding that everything is belonging to Krishna, and everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. Without this, we can't help but see distinctions between the very thin outer covering of the soul. But somehow by Krishna's mercy, when we come to know him, we come to know his parts and parcels as well. So we should understand that by thinking of Krishna even once, by glorifying his Dham even once, by chanting his name even once, by doing any of these activities once, one has the opportunity to receive the ultimate benedictions of the Lord and attain him. This is also understood by the pastimes of Ajamil. There's a nice story where Srila Prabhupada was translating that part of the Bhagavatam, and he was giving classes on it, and he was having Pradyumna, his Sanskrit editor, read the verses before he spoke on them. And at the particular point where Ajamil calls for his son, I just lost the word for the Krishna. The manuscript. The manuscript had Narayan's name thrice. So Pradyumna had read Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. Prabhupada interrupted him and said, "No, once." He said the name just once. So that's the power of chanting any of the Lord's names, that just once it has the potency to deliver us if we actually chant it. I've been reading Harinam Chintamani lately, and in that it's describing that there's chanting and then there's everything else. Chanting means purely chanting without distraction or confusion. And it calls the Namabas stage as shadow chanting. So if we're not even on the stage of Namabas, then we're not even shadow chanting the name. But by this cultivation of the mind, then we can come to actually chant Krishna's name without offense. So, for some reason, there's a weird gap in my notes. But anyway, the next topic is to talk about the Dham. The Dham is first of all, a place for Krishna to have his pastimes. And when Krishna decides he doesn't want to externally manifest his pastimes anymore in the Dham, It doesn't mean that he stops doing them. It means that most of us can't see them. And the Dham is also a place for sadhus to congregate. When I was in Vrindavan, I was talking to some devotees, and one of them said, actually, the problem that we're experiencing in Vrindavan right now, that the residents are experiencing, is that Vrindavan is supposed to be a place for sadhus and renunciates to live, and other people come and visit them and inquire about Krishna. But there are so many people now that aren't living the life of a sadhu within Vrindavan that it causes some external kind of imbalance. But still, there are plenty of sadhus living in Vrindavan. Just for the purpose of sadhu sangha, Srila Prabhupada constructed places like the Krishna Balaram Mandir, which serve for us as a spiritual hub, places for people to gather with real sadhus and perfect their realizations about Krishna, share those realizations with others. Srila Prabhupada envisioned for the movement that every year we would have a Mayapur Vrindavan festival, where the preaching and book distributing devotees would go to Mayapur and Vrindavan for a month and become spiritually surcharged so that they are enlivened and fired up to go back and distribute more books when they get to the US. So this is it's a very nice thing. I had 6 of those in a row, more or less. So I should be 6 times as fired up. Prabhupada also had an according desire with Mayapur to develop it into another place for sadhu sangha. I was hearing at one point about half of the land that ISKCON owns in Mayapur has been dedicated for educational purposes of one kind or another, which is really impressive because they own a lot of land, very significant amount of land. And there's so much going on in that way already. This year is for example, the 25th anniversary of the Mayapur Institute, which does Bhakti Shastri through Bhakti Vedanta. They have a very nice campus there, and they're planning to have much bigger campus in the near future. This is, for Mayapur, actually a historical thing. Mayapur, specifically Nadia, was known as a place of great education. And by the desire of our acharyas, we are making it again into both a place of pilgrimage and a place for spiritual education. So the final point from this verse that I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on was the super soul who is always happy. The Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, as the one sun appears reflected in countless jewels, so Govinda manifests himself as Paramatma in the heart of all living beings. Krishna, although always in his transcendental abode always doing his various activities, is also seated in the heart of every living entity, no matter how small or gigantic, as the super soul. Earlier in the Bhagavatam, that in the third canto, talks about how the pure devotee respects all living entities, and the devotee knows that Krishna has entered the body of all living entities as the super soul. In the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada mentions that that doesn't mean that man becomes God, but instead that the power of the Supreme Lord is such that he can enter into a living entity without it all being diminished from his supreme abode, something only the Supreme Personality of Godhead is capable of. So this verse that we read today is, in summary, describing the power of the Lord as he resides in his devotees, and not just in his devotees, but in every living being. And he is eternally residing in his dhams. And the devotees of the Lord, how they never pay attention. The verbiage used is they never worship things that steal them away from Krishna. But we can understand that a little more simply, that they're never spending time or energy on things that take them away from Krishna. And this verse also gives glorification to the super soul. This is the expertise of the Vedas, of the Shrutis, and the glory of all the scriptures in general, that inherent in just a few lines, there are so many things that they can discuss, and from those few lines, so many purports can be given. I often like to remind myself that each verse of the Bhagavatam is, in one way or another, directing us, either directly or indirectly. It's pointing us towards Krishna. And this chapter in particular is very nice for that, because the verses themselves, they take on this personified form to directly show us this fact, that they're always speaking the glories of Krishna and reminding us of Krishna. Can be a little hard to understand. Can be quite intellectually challenging. Even the concept of, personified Vedas is quite hard to wrap one's head around if one does any amount of thinking about it. But this is the truth, that each verse is a person. So just by reading the Bhagavatam, by reading a verse of the Bhagavatam, we're associating with a sadhu. And by reading Prabhupada's purports, we're associating with Srila Prabhupada. And not just we're associating with the verse and Prabhupada, but when we chant the verses in meter, Rupa Goswami in one of his books points out that the meters that we chant the verses in are also persons, personalities. So there's this very great depth of sadhu sangha that one gets from reading, and even more so when one comes to Bhagavatam class and hears from a devotee and sits among other devotees and discusses a little bit about the verse. So we still have a little bit of time if anyone wants to increase the vibrations.
Krishna. Thank you so much for your profound session. So we took us so deeply into the idea of everything is ultimately connected to Krishna, devotee. And appreciation of devotees is appreciation of Krishna. Still, we lose track of that reality. In our conditioning, we bring it down to my my ego. So I was just contemplating, can we not lose sight of Krishna in everything that's connected to it? So, I would like to share some thoughts.
One of the things that I was thinking about, sometimes it would pop into my head like, God, this guy's an idiot. I'm pretty well versed at criticism, well practiced. But I realized when I have gratitude, and it can be a chore sometimes, because most of us are conditioned in one way or another, and those of us who are conditioned usually see the conditioning of others a lot quicker than we see the good qualities. So, doing some real mental effort to try to find something to be grateful for about that person is, for me, the excuse me, it's the beginning of not criticizing. When I can give appreciation to the most annoying person that I know, then it's a little bit harder to criticize them. And when I give appreciation to the most annoying person I know, Krishna is pleased with that. And knowing that Krishna is pleased with that is something that helps me to continue to do it. And when we're in the habit of trying to find the good in others, and particularly paying that extra mind to finding the good in the people that drive us crazy, then it becomes easier to glorify those who we don't have so many problems with. So that's kind of my methodology. So I start with the hardest part. And if I can do the hard part, then the easier parts are almost natural by that point. And then, it's said that Krishna is pleased when we glorify him, but he becomes very pleased when we glorify his devotees. So much so that, if there's a group of people sitting around glorifying Krishna in one way or another, he doesn't pay so much attention because there's so many people trying to do that. But when someone glorifies his devotee, he comes and listens to that glorification. So, he also says, anyone who claims to be my devotee isn't my devotee, but one who says they're the devotee of my devotee is my devotee. So, I'm trying to find the good in others. And at some point, I have to remind myself that I'm also not the number one greatest devotee in the world. That gives a little bit of humility when I actually, remind myself of that fact.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
So this verse is talking about devotees who hold Krishna within their hearts, their places of pilgrimage themselves. But that idea of somebody being holy, pure devotee, to respect a human so much, that is losing relevance in modern society. People find it very awkward if you offer a lot of respect to somebody, a holy man. So, what do you think? Why is the society, and how can we present that the position of a holy person, a pure devotee, requires that level of reverence and worship? Because now it becomes so difficult to offer that kind of awe to another human. People find it a little, withdrawn in mindset.
Well, look at the people these donkeys are worshiping. You know, someone who's very good at throwing a ball around. Oh, somebody who can, scream at the top of their lungs. Oh, someone who can pretend to be other people very expertly, so much so that nobody's really sure who they actually are. Oh, they're so wonderful. The modern day celebrities are who the general population are worshiping. And that's because they're identifying, these people, usually they have a lot of money, or they're very attractive, or some other, mundane thing. Because that's where they're putting their importance. They don't know what's actually important. They don't even know who they are. And if someone doesn't know who they are, how could they actually identify somebody who is important? But there's so many stories when we hear Srila Prabhupada's pastimes of people who didn't know who he was, but just by seeing them, they knew, oh, this person is very important, actually important. So when we put Prabhupada first, we're putting, the best example of a devotee first. But it's our job as people who know what the truth is to fill in others as to what the actual truth is. We look at a lot of the propaganda that was used by devotees in the 60s and 70s. It was very, very intelligent. Stay high forever. At that time, everybody was, very big into drugs. People are into drugs now, and the inevitability with drugs is you're going to come down. But somebody who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is far higher than anyone on drugs is. So they tailor the message according to the audience, which we should be expert at, So when we're dealing with these people who consider, musicians and sports ball players and celebrities to be, people worthy of respect, who's the most famous person that you know personally? Got someone in mind? There you go. I've asked that to people and they give the name of some, D-list celebrity. I'm like, well, Prabhu, you're a devotee, right? Yeah, but, I met this person a few times, or I have their number or whatever. Yeah, but you're a devotee, right? Yeah, I'm a devotee. Well, Krishna, right? He's the most famous. So when we share with people how Krishna is the most famous, how wonderful Krishna is, how wonderful his activities are, it's a very attractive thing. It's far more attractive than, any of these mundane people who are doing, all sorts of nonsense. They're just groping around in the dark, trying to be, less than a fraction as cool as Krishna is. We don't have any hope of comparing. So when we can present Krishna like that, for being as wonderful as he is, then naturally people will be attracted. And when they're, a little bit attracted to Krishna, then they see the devotees of Krishna, the activities of the devotees of Krishna, they'll also be attracted to those people as well. But if somebody thinks day is night and night is day, they're going to get scared when the sun comes out. Oh God, I got to go. So we have to, educate them that their thinking is backwards and show them what way is actually up and which way is actually down. Anything else?
Thank you, Prabhu. Clarifies. Thank you for your eloquent and profound presentation.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatribhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha